All right, welcome back to the Clean for Profit podcast, where we talk about how the heck to do all of this, how to start, maintain, manage, and scale a cleaning business. My name is Colby. I'm the owner of Sierra Window Cleaning and Super Clean websites. We're out of Auburn, California, and I have once again with me Dave Scribani of Glass Therapy out of Clarksville, Tennessee. Dave, thanks for hopping on, bud.
Yeah, man, of course. I also, if anyone caught that, we have a name.
We do, yeah. The podcast has been named, so there we go.
Is this the first episode where you made that announcement?
Yeah, the first episode where it's not just welcome back to the podcast. I tossed around so many different ideas and kind of just landed on something that was simple but punchy enough. So there we go.
Yeah.
It's been fun talking to you. There's I don't know, I guess we're both probably kind of geeks to the outside world with I think there's very few people that have talked as much as you and I have about running a business, about cleaning glass. Yeah. And so I often think about the outsider or, some of my church friends or something like that, hearing me talk to you specifically about the things that we've talked about. And it's like, wow, that's so esoteric. But I think one thing that's cool about the relationship that we've established is we both have unique approaches, and we both have our own goals that we were kind of going after when we started this in the first place.
Yeah.
You've been doing it way less time than I have. And yet your scale has been significantly more than anything that I've ever attained, which I think is awesome, man. And for the longest time, it's been something that I've kind of avoided. And I won't go into too much detail because we have in other podcasts, but I have another business that I'm spinning up, the Super Clean Websites agency, and that's kind of had me teetering between whether or not to scale the window cleaning business simultaneously. I'm of the persuasion that I'm not going to scale both as well as I could if I'm trying to split my focus. But that just kind of comes down to what the topic of this podcast today is, which is when to start hiring. So I think probably a good place to start is just kind of a higher level of talking about who we are and why we started this business in the first place. Because like I mentioned, we've had two totally unique approaches. It's been me and 2 to 3 other guys for just over 8 years now. And I've really enjoyed that and have done that kind of intentionally. And frankly, I mean, you've kind of done the opposite, where it's like you're 18, 19 months in, and you're more or less out of the truck, other than doing estimates, which I'm sure will be something that'll be outsourced in the next 12 to 18 months. So could you talk for a minute about what your general philosophy is for hiring from the perspective of building your business?
Yeah. And I think it's important to share too. I am figuring this out as I go, right? So I have, the only other business I ever owned was a marketing agency prior to this, and I was a lone ranger in that. So I never hired. I did outsource various tasks that I didn't want to do myself, but those weren't employees, they're contractors. And for me, when I started window cleaning myself, I started going door to door. Granted that I only did that for about a month and a half before I got busy enough to where I did not have to knock doors. And that was as a result of just my marketing background and why that snowballed for me so quickly. But my goal from day one was I wanted to have employees, and I wanted to scale, and I wanted to have several trucks, whatever number that is down the road, I don't know. And the advice that I got from a friend of mine who had a business, and it wasn't in the service space, but he had a couple dozen employees. And when I asked him, how do you know when to bring on your first hire? And his advice to me was, you should hire someone just before you can afford them. And that's exactly what I did. When I brought on my first guy, he worked alongside me every day. And it was hard. It was hard to pay him. But the upside of that is, by the time he was up to speed and a confident window cleaner that could go do jobs without me being there with him, at that very point, it's like we intersected with this road where now I could afford him and he's good to go off on his own. And that was at that point where those two paths crossed, when I actually needed him, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I hired him before I could afford him, just barely before I could afford him, and before I technically needed help. And by the time he was ready, I was ready for him to actually go off and do Windows, and I actually needed his help. The flip side to that is a lot of us wait too long because we get nervous, and it is a very nerve-wracking thing when you're not just now responsible for your own income and your household, but now you're responsible for someone else's household income. There is a lot of stress there, but it was a game changer because when you try to hire past the point where you are so far beyond needing help, you won't have the time to train them to come up with systems and processes. It's going to be a sloppy mess for everybody. And that's the idea, is you want to try to avoid that. There's a cost to waiting too long.
Hey, if you've got a question you want answered on the show, whether it's pricing, marketing, equipment, or anything window cleaning business related, we would love to feature it. Our goal is to build this show around what actually helps you the most, so head over to cleanforprofit.com/ask or click the link in the description to send something in. I think at the end of the day, when you hire somebody new, like we don't work in an incredibly technical field, so the training process isn't wildly long and cumbersome, but it does slow you down to some degree. The idea of hiring just before you can afford it is definitely nerve-wracking. I mean, I've always heard like when you can afford it, which I guess is similar, but distinctly different from just before you can afford it, because there's pressure there and there's an incentive to keep your momentum up. But yeah, like you mentioned, on the flip side of being so busy that you have to hire, you're going from being totally overwhelmed with the amount of business that you're trying to handle yourself to trying to do the same amount of volume while actually for the first couple of weeks probably working a little bit slower
You are.
because you're spending extra time working with that person side by side, shoulder to shoulder. So that's a great point. I mean, you need to hire when you need to hire, but I think in terms of seasonality, it's probably like the beginning of the season is probably the best time to do so, because it's only going to get busier and you have a little bit of margin for being a little bit less performant than you otherwise would be.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just about, I knew that I wanted to have the time to actually teach that person how to clean windows properly, like a professional.
Right.
And, I knew that if you wait too long, you just, the quality of that one-on-one training is going to go down.
Just for some additional context, in terms of employees, how many employees do you currently have, and what are you looking to hopefully do in the next like 6 to 9 months in terms of employee count?
Yeah, so I have 2 right now, but 1 is leaving and his last day is next Thursday. And for me, that's new territory. This is the first time I've had someone leave. And I've been super fortunate with the 2 guys that I have. They go to church with us, so I've already known who they were. I picked them because I knew their character and I knew they were hard workers, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing finding good workers. That's also going to be, new territory for me. So his last day is on Thursday next week, and I am grateful that he's stepping away in what is our slower season. Because I actually have the capacity to kind of step in as needed and work with my team lead and help him with Windows on an as needed basis. So, and it also gives me some time to really dial in, what do I want my hiring and interviewing process to look like? And I'm mapping that out now. How many interviews? What are the types of questions I want to ask? What do I want the pay to start out at? Documenting all of that, and how do I want to train? Like, I don't necessarily want to train the same way I did with the first guy that I hired or the second. I would really like to have a little bit more like intentional, like the first 2 weeks, it's all it is training. Like, it's me and them. Maybe we're just at my house the whole time, teaching them how to appropriately and safely take ladders off the truck and leaning them against a house and where not to lean them. How to use a squeegee. How do you know when you can use a scraper, and how do you use scrapers and steel wool? So, I want to have a really strict, regimented system in place to bring people on so that we can duplicate that process over and over and over again.
Yeah, that makes sense. I am curious what you see that looking like. Do you see 2 trucks hopefully running full time by peak season next year, or more than that, less than that? What are you aiming for?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We have well over $100,000 scheduled for 2026 already. So, while I look at that number and I'm like, oh wow, that's amazing. That's comforting. I'm also like, well, I already know that we're going to bring in a bunch of new business as well. On top of that, there's plenty of existing customers that I know are going to schedule again. And if we're not even at 2026 yet, and we're already 55% past our current revenue that we've done in 2025,
Yeah,
like, geez, at minimum, I need another crew.
right.
Yeah, my goal is to, um, I need to replace the gentleman that's leaving on Thursday, and then I need to hire 2 more people. We run 2-man crews. I know some window cleaning companies run one-man crews. Some people run 2. I have not tried a one-man crew yet. It's something I might experiment with at some point. So I really ultimately have, I think, 3 more people that I need to hire, along with doubling our window cleaning equipment while also buying another vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah, plenty
It's
to consider there for sure.
it's a lot, and all of that is nerve-wracking too. I mean,
Yeah,
the amount of finances that go into, I'll have to spend $15,000 just on equipment, just
yeah.
doubling what we have.
Yeah, before you're able to house it in something with wheels and a motor.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're a window cleaner or home service pro with a story worth sharing, we want to have you on the show. Clean for Profit is all about real operators building real businesses. So if you've got wins, lessons, or even failures that others can avoid, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to cleanforprofit.com/guest or click the link in the description to get started. All right, back to the episode. You mentioned, your first 2 hires were connections from church. I think that at a certain scale, that approach only goes so far.
100%.
Like, if you one day have 50 employees, you're not going to know them all personally before you end up hiring them. But we also talked a little bit of how to start that hiring process, and it seems to me like nothing beats a personal connection typically in terms of what the highest success approach is. This last season I had one guy work with me that was a mutual connection from church as well. But yeah, I think that one of the best things with hiring that way, as opposed to like having something on ZipRecruiter or Indeed, is that there's already trust there, and there's also reputation. If you have a relationship with somebody who knows somebody else that's looking for a job, there's some reputation attached to whatever the outcome is
Yes.
for how that job goes, how you are as an employer, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody kind of has some skin in the game compared to basically just meeting somebody on a dating app for jobs. So at your scale, I assume you'll probably continue to go with that approach and exhaust that until you have no more leads. But that is an assumption. Is that kind of what you're going to be the thing you're going to be pursuing to find these people?
Yeah, yeah, for now, I'm going to avoid the Indeed and LinkedIn stuff. I'm gonna really, really try to exhaust just the network of people that I know. And thankfully that network is honestly pretty large here. So I feel like that is still gonna be a good avenue. And I mean, I could probably just post something on my personal Facebook page and then my company, like Glass Therapy Instagram, and I guarantee people are gonna respond with either being interested themselves or they know people who are. And it was I would say a big success hiring 2 people that I knew and that I was friends with. The only thing that I would say is really important to set, I think, boundaries ahead of time, especially if you're already really close with those people, is you want to hire somebody, if you know them and you're friends with them, somebody who is emotionally mature. And what I mean by that is someone who can very easily acknowledge, we're friends, but when we're at work, I'm the boss. And I still treat people with the utmost respect, but my tone might be a little different when we're in the working relationship and I have a boss hat on versus a friend or brother hat on.
Right.
And you want to make sure that the person that you're hiring is aware of that ahead of time. We had those conversations. Like, I really had to I pulled them aside. I talked to them. I told them about the role. They were excited about it. And then I explained, like, hey, I just want you guys to know we're going to have a part of our relationship is going to be a working professional relationship. The other side is we go to church together. We all hang out outside of church. Like, we're all good friends and we joke around with each other, but we're not going to do those things at work.
Right. Yeah, having that distinction is definitely important for sure. Especially because as somebody who, like, as kind of a chuck in the truck, if you've been running around solo, like you didn't do this for very long, but if you're a guy that's been working solo for, many, many years, your stature, how you um speak and communicate with clients, and just your general conduct on a client's property becomes kind of second nature to
Yeah.
you. But I think it can be really easy if you have somebody that you're working with that you've been friends with for, a decade, to kind of shed that and have a bit too much of a casual hat on when you're around that kind of influence. So I think setting the stage for that early and being really, really consistent with that is super crucial.
Yeah. Yeah, it
So
was. And it still is. I mean, there are times where I've had to have difficult conversations with them that were just work related, things that needed just personal growth, correcting, guiding, leading, that for them might seem like this isn't like the fun Dave I hang out with, and
yeah,
it's not always fun, but thankfully they're very good at balancing that, and not everyone is. And if they're not, then hiring that person that might not be a good idea. Because at the end
totally.
of the day, you don't want to sacrifice a friendship just to bring on a team member for help.
Right. Yeah. So start hiring right before you can afford it. I think one of the biggest objections to, maybe not directly to that statement, but definitely one of the things that I consider the most is, like, the years that I've worked as a solo guy, the June, July, August, September, like that time of year is very, very busy for us, or for me. And I think one of the first things I think of just in my own head when it comes to hiring somebody is like, what about the off season?
Hmm.
So I think that you're in, a fortunate position, uh, not out of luck, out of your work
Location.
ethic and knowledge, etc. Location, is that what you said?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean,
Yeah.
location too. Our off season it definitely slows down, but I think it's not as bad as what some people probably face. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wonder, like, for a lot of the time that we've done it, we've also offered gutter cleaning, like we've had secondary services. I just wonder what your general thoughts are on that objection in general. Because there's been seasons where I work and then I look forward to December, January, and half of February. But, if you have employees that are depending on your schedule and the reliability of your schedule for their income as well, they're not necessarily making, 3, 4 months worth of reserve funds in July. They need employment year round. So I don't even have a specific question related to that, but I wonder what you do with that hesitation or, yeah, potential issue that comes up when hiring.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the first winter I'm going into having people working for me. And I will say this entire summer, that thought it definitely caused some paranoia. Wondering, how are we going to pull this off? And I kept a very transparent, kind of open conversation with my team just about that season as it was approaching. And I brought that up, one, immediately when I hired them. And two, I would bring that up. We would have weekly meetings too. So me and my window cleaners, it started out as every Monday, then we moved it to Fridays. But we have in the morning on Fridays, we meet on a weekly basis. And there was several times in those meetings where I would bring up, like, hey, I'm just reminding you guys, I don't know what this winter is going to look like compared to last year. I had just started it the year prior. It was just me. A week before Thanksgiving, business just stopped, like, completely. Thankfully, this year has been the opposite. November is literally going to be a record month. So I don't know if that has to do with, I think it has to do with a little bit of we're more known now than we were, and we're more established. People know who we are. We've also had nicer weather this November compared to last November. Maybe the economy's a little better. I'm sure there's a lot of factors that play into that.
Yeah.
But all that to say, I kept open dialogue about we're going to enter a slow season. I don't know what that looks like yet for us. It might be that I have to lay you off. I don't know. I hope that's not the case. But I just want you guys to also be ready for that. If that scares you, this might not be the job for you. You know?
Totally. I mean, I think being open and transparent about that is super important, while not being, not letting the doomsday kind of attitude or thoughts
Yeah.
that kind of creep into your head kind of get through, which I think goes back to professionalism as well, like, and having influence around you in terms of how you conduct yourself. I've definitely let that happen a little bit because I work a lot of the time with my brother. My brother works with me full time now, and that conversation obviously comes up. And similar to you, like you mentioned, I know there's definitely a lot of factors at play with how the late season is going this
Yeah.
year, but that's been the case for us as well. I mean, in the last month we've done our biggest contract ever, and then, as I was telling you a few minutes before we started recording, 3 days ago, the day before Thanksgiving, we had one of our biggest days of the season. So it's hard to make heads or tails of it, to be honest with you. But I mean, I'll take it, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I mean, it's the same for us. We've had, it was a mixture of just being busy in general, but we've also had a number of unusually large jobs week after week, which obviously played a role in increasing revenue. And when that happens, it's hard for me to then say, when we start approaching November of 2026 and thinking that might be the same, because this month
right.
almost feels like an anomaly based on
Yeah.
if there was like 5 total jobs for the entire month of November that didn't exist, it would not be a record month. So to me, it's like, well, we're only going to build so many 4-story buildings that are going to need post-construction window cleaning. That's going to drive revenue
Right.
like that. Right. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm grateful I haven't had to lay anyone off. I'm grateful that my employee that's stepping away, that it is happening during a time where it's manageable. And I'll have time to jump in and clean windows again if I have to, while also working on hiring and training somebody else.
Yeah. Totally. Cool, man. Let's touch briefly on like the interview process in general. And then I think that's in terms of like a short day after Thanksgiving. I know you've got Black Friday plans to go get a new gaming console or something.
I will.
So, you mentioned in a private talk earlier that you worked for an employer previously.
You can say it. You can say
Okay,
it.
you worked at the Ramsey Corporation for Mr. Dave Ramsey a handful of years ago. I believe you were in the sales department, and you mentioned in that talk that the interview process included 11 interviews over about a 6-month time frame.
That's right.
Obviously, that is very industry specific. You can't do that with window cleaning unless you're being very methodical and intentional, and it would be totally wasteful probably to do so. But I'm curious, I'd love to just hear about that general interview process. Like what the heck, Dave? Why 11 interviews over so long? Can you stop dragging this out? But I know Dave, I don't know Dave, but I know I've listened to a lot of Dave, so I understand his methodology to some degree. But tell us about that interview process, how that like helped or hurt your image of the Ramsey network, and what you're taking from that to implement into your business.
100%. Yeah. So I had so many takeaways from that process. And there's 2 reasons I think why Ramsey spends so much time and resources into interviewing people, is because the first one is they want to make sure, one, that you're getting hired for something that you actually are passionate about. They don't just hire people to fill a job. It's, you either love what you do or you're basically encouraged to leave. So if you don't like what you do, go find something else and go be happy and prosperous doing something that you actually love. I'm all for that. I think that's great. If you love what you do, a byproduct of that is you're going to be a great producer. of whatever role you're in, right?
Right.
So that's one. They also want to make sure that you have a character that aligns with the company's overall morals. And in order to really know someone's character, that literally takes time. Like you have to have
Right.
multiple interactions. So over those 11 interviews, I think 9 of them were with different people every time.
Wow. Wow.
And again, the reason for that is all of those people are coming together after the interview to make sure that you're a consistent person. You're answering things consistently. And then the other part of it is, even if I didn't get the job, actually, I'm going to back up real quick. At the first interview, I was given 2 chapter books. And they're like, we want you to read these books throughout the interview process. One was called Who Stole My Cheese? Great, great read. The other one was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni.
Mm.
And they said, we want you to read these books. All that to what I'm trying to get at there is, by the last interview, and I had finished those books, even if they had come to me and said, hey, Dave, we really like you. Here's your great qualities. Here's the things that, we think you need to improve on. You're not going to get hired by us. We wish you the best. I would have left that interview feeling like I grew in my my interview ability and leadership just by having 11 total hours over the course of 6 months with those individuals that interviewed me. I literally would have left feeling more equipped than I did prior to applying there. And that's honestly their goal. They're like, well, if we're going to spend this amount of time with you, we also want to make sure you're being invested in during this time. We don't want this to just be about us hiring you. All that to say, I did get hired. The last and final interview, they call it the spousal interview. They take you and your spouse out to a very fancy dinner, obviously paid for by Ramsey Solutions. And the idea behind that is they also want to get to know your wife, because they know, or your husband, they know that if they're hiring you, if your marriage is in shambles, it's going to probably affect your work-life balance.
Yeah.
Probably pulling you away from work, which is a problem. So they just do a really good job at getting to know you. To some, that might seem, nosy, but at the end of the day, their organization runs like a well-oiled machine because of how they hire people. So all that to say, I'm not going to interview people 11 times. That's not going to happen. But I definitely have just some solid takeaways that I know that I will implement. One, I think I will interview 2, maybe 3 times. I might do that. And the reason that is, that's almost like the intention behind that is very similar to why I add a couple of like probing questions in my Facebook lead forms that I teach people to fill out or create for their meta campaigns. Because the more difficult you make the form fill, the more that the interest that they have in working with you is probably heightened.
Right.
So I know that if someone will give me 3 interviews, they're probably pretty serious.
Hmm.
Because how many times have you probably seen where someone hires somebody and they interview them, and anyone can be fake in an interview for 30 minutes. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to put on a mask and pretend you are better than you are. And then you hire them and they don't even show up the first day.
Right.
I'd rather them not show up at the second interview, and then I know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing I'll probably implement. And then the other is, I don't care how good they are at cleaning windows. I don't care if they've never done it before. What I want to get to know is their character, their personal morals, and do those align with what I want as an employee. So most of, I think, my interview questions in general are going to be around character, not skill. I can teach skill. I can't teach character.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Sweet, man. Yeah, that's solid. Well, I'll be either ripping your question sheet from you in a few months, or trying to figure out a way to hack into your computer so I can
I'll
get
send
that interview sheet. So, yeah, man. Thanks for hopping on to talk about this. Like you mentioned at the beginning, we're both kind of, this is new territory for us. I think me even more than you. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll revisit this topic maybe at a slightly different angle before too long, after, both of us have some more experience. Because I think the the best thing, or maybe the worst case scenario about hiring is like, no matter what, every time you learn something. So I've definitely had somebody that I under interviewed,
Mm.
and like they showed up, wasn't as reliable as I wanted it to be. And that's totally on me. That should have been more scrupulous during that time. So yeah, man, I appreciate you hopping on to talk about this. And yeah, we'll check in on that, in 6 to 8 months when you've got a few more hires under your belt.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Good luck, man. We'll talk again soon.
All right, bro. Thanks so much.